We don't even know what happens when a B-17 is not supposed to fly, but refuses to crash. On June 16, 1943, something came out of the sky that should never have made it back. At Port Moresby Airfield in New Guinea, ground crews looked up and froze because what they saw wasn't an airplane. It was a flying wreck. Smoke poured from its engines. The nose was torn apart. The tail barely hung on. Any other bomber would have fallen into the ocean hours earlier. This one didn't. It dragged itself through the clouds, lined up with the runway, and slammed into the dirt. Men braced for an explosion. None came. Instead, the aircraft skidded, screamed, and stopped. When the crews ran closer, they realized something chilling. They weren't seeing damage. They were seeing survival. They began counting the holes. 100, 200, 300. They stopped after 500. Inside the cockpit, blood covered the controls. The pilot was unconscious. One gunner was already dead. And yet, against physics, against probability, against war itself, the bomber had returned. This was old 666, and what had survived that day would become one of the most unbelievable stories of World War II. To understand how this happened, you first have to understand the man at the controls, Captain J. Zemmer. He wasn't a hero type. He was a problem. Zemmer ignored rules, slept through briefings, flew unauthorized routes just to see what was out there. In the rigid structure of the U.S. Army Air Forces, that made him dangerous. No commander wanted him, no pilot wanted to fly with him, and no one wanted to give him an airplane. But Zemmer wanted combat, so he did something unheard of. He built his own crew, not the best, not the favorites, the leftovers, men labeled misfits, troublemakers. Men considered too wild for normal missions. They called themselves the Eager Beavers. Now they needed one thing, a plane, since no one would assign them a new B-17. Zemmer walked to the end of the runway, to the boneyard. There, sitting among wrecks and scrap, was a B-17E with a reputation. Tail number 412666. It had been shot up, abandoned, written off. Ground crews called it cursed, a flying coffin. But Zemmer didn't see a coffin. He saw a weapon. They spent weeks rebuilding that bomber. If they were flying a cursed plane, they would make it the deadliest one in the sky. A standard B-17 carried 13 machine guns. Zemmer said that wasn't enough. He scavenged parts, added extra waist guns, rewired mounts. Then he did something no heavy bomber pilot had ever done. He installed a fixed 50 caliber machine gun in the nose, one he could fire himself. By the time they finished, old 666 carried 19 heavy machine guns, the most heavily armed bomber in the Pacific. Then the call came, a photo reconnaissance mission over Bougainville, a Japanese stronghold, anti-aircraft guns, fighter squadrons, no escort, a 1,200-mile round trip. By every definition, a suicide mission. The Eager Beavers didn't hesitate. They volunteered. They reached Bougainville at 8:00 a.m. They needed 20 minutes to take the photos. They got 5 fighters at 12 o'clock, not a patrol, a swarm. 17 Mitsubishi Zeros climbing fast. The Japanese pilots saw a lone bomber, easy kill. They lined up for a frontal attack straight at the cockpit. The first pass, shattered glass. A 20mm shell exploded in the nose. Sergeant Joseph Sarnowski was thrown backward, mortally wounded. Bullets tore into the cockpit. Captain Zima was hit in the arms and legs. The plane dove. Oxygen destroyed. Hydraulics cut. This was where it should have ended, but it didn't. Bleeding out, Sarnowski dragged himself back to his gun. He refused medical aid. He pulled himself upright and fired. 2 Zeros went down in seconds. Then he collapsed. He had bought his crew time with his life. What followed was the longest continuous dogfight of World War II, 45 minutes. Captain Zima, barely conscious, fought the controls with shattered arms. Every time a Zero attacked head-on, he turned the bomber into it, firing his nose gun like a fighter pilot. The Japanese had never seen anything like it. Wave after wave hammered the plane. Bullets ripped through wings, through the tail, through the radio room. Inside, the crew slipped in blood and shell casings, but they kept firing. 5 enemy fighters went down. Eventually the Zeros broke off, low on fuel, low on ammunition. They assumed the bomber wouldn't make it home. They were wrong. The fight was over. The struggle wasn't. Hundreds of miles remained. Zemmer was fading. The co-pilot tried to take over. Zemmer refused. Only he knew how to fly this broken machine. When WWII airstrip finally appeared, they had no flaps, no brakes. He came in fast. Too fast. The plane slammed down, skidded, and groaned, then stopped. Only then did Zemmer pass out. He had lost half his blood. Doctors gave him little chance, but, like old 666, he survived. When crews inspected the bomber, they were horrified. 187 cannon holes, over 500 total impacts. The plane was held together by wire and willpower. For that mission, J. Zemmer received the Medal of Honor. So did Joseph Cernowski posthumously. The Eager Beavers became the most decorated aircrew in U.S. history. They proved something timeless. Machines don't win wars. People do.